Good morning. We request everybody to stay still for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem to be followed by the opening prayer.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Today is the second day of the Philippine Startup Week 2021 with the theme Beyond Recovery, Filipino Startups Redefining Opportunity. Today's program is titled InnovNation. The InnovNation program aims to promote a culture of innovation, one where innovative startups provide solutions to social challenges. This program hopes to raise awareness about the opportunities created by startups and provide learning opportunities and initiatives that will support and foster the growth of the startup ecosystem through two panel discussions. To kick off the second day of the conference, let us all
To our partners for the Philippine Startup Week 2021, Secretary Fortunato de la Peña of the Department of Science and Technology, Secretary Ramon Lopez of the Department of Trade and Industry, Mr. Butch Mealy of the Idea Space Foundation and Kubo Innovation Hub, Director Emilio Delfin of the ICT Industry Development Bureau, our moderators, panelists, guests, colleagues, and friends, good morning. It is with great pleasure to introduce our distinguished partners and speakers and to welcome all of our participants in this year's Philippine Startup Week. On behalf of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, I would like to express my gratitude to all our attendees, especially our esteemed moderators and panelists. May we have a fruitful discussion that would enlighten and inspire our participants and viewers today. The theme of this year's Philippine Startup Week is Beyond Recovery, Filipino Startups Redefining Opportunity. And this 5-day virtual conference is a collaborative initiative by the DICT, DOST, DTI, and Kubo Innovation Hub, which brings together startup founders, investors, corporates, the academe, media, and government in one virtual stage to foster collaboration and innovation. We have invited startups from different provinces in the Philippines in order to learn from their stories and experiences. We wish to emphasize that successful startups are not just those Filipinos in Metro Manila, as we have also a lot of innovators in the countryside. We at the DICT want to continuously build a strong Filipino startup community. The DICT will provide support activities such as boot camps and workshops which intend to make Filipinos aware of the advantages of building their own startups. We also want to highlight innovative solutions from various industries and sectors which can encourage both local and international startup ecosystem stakeholders to participate. One project that widens networks of our Filipino startups and offer great opportunities is the Philippine Startup Challenge, an annual startup competition that, that we conduct for all ICT-based startups in the ideation and minimum viable product stage. In fact, the finals of the professional category will happen this afternoon. After the conference, I would like to take this opportunity to invite you all to watch the top 25 startup teams in their final pitching and also learn from their innovative ideas. Once again, I would like to welcome all the participants in our conference this morning. May we all learn from one another. Do not hesitate to ask questions, as this is the perfect opportunity to receive guidance from startups and mentors who have already experienced the concerns in their starting stages. Thank you and stay safe. Mabuhay kayong lahat.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Kaintek, for your uplifting remarks. Our first speaker this morning is the Director 4 of the Department of Information and Communications Technology, and her presentation is entitled Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program. Ms.
Thank you so much, Michael. Hello, good morning, everyone. First of all, to our partners in today's Philippine Startup Week event, DTI, DOST, Kubo, of course, my two bosses, Yusek Manika and Asek Alvin Navarro, our speakers, panelists, and moderators, fellow public servants, representatives from the academe, of course, the entire startup community, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Again, welcome to the DICT Day entitled InnovNation. And since today is our DICT Day, I'm pleased to share with you our startup initiative called the Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program. Last year, when we had the Philippine Startup Week 2019, we actually introduced this DSDAP, and now I'm going to share with you some updates about our Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program. Can we go to the next slide, please? Before I present the DSDAP, I would like to share with you that the DICT is committed to promote the use of ICT to accelerate the digital transformation of the country. And for the Philippines to participate and to be a key significant player in the global digital economy, I would like to share with you the chip that we have actually adopted. This is based on the World Bank's published Philippine Digital Economy Report. And this framework is presented into 4 key components that would constitute the acceleration of the digital transformation of the country, especially with the challenges of the times. So as you can see here, the chip stands for letter C, Connect, which is about building the digital foundation. So our programs that include the National Broadband Program, the public free Wi-Fi, and the data centers facilities and are under the letter C or Connect component. Then we have letter H, which is Harness. Harness is about investing in digital education, skills, and jobs. So our programs that include the Digital Cities program, bringing opportunities to the countryside, ICT Academy, and the different upskilling and reskilling initiatives of the DICT are under letter H or Harness. Then we go to letter I, which is Innovate. Innovate is about expanding digital government and business services. And we have a lot of initiatives under this, but I would like to emphasize that the Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program is under letter I or Innovate. Then the last component, which is letter P or Protect. This is about mitigating the risks in a digital economy. So our initiatives on making sure that our critical information infrastructure, protection, cybersecurity policies are under this letter P or Protect. So can we go to the next slide, please? Under the chip framework, as I mentioned, so letter I, DSDAP is under that. And I would like to share that even before DICT, we were then DOST ICTO, we've been implementing different initiatives all over the country, encouraging Filipinos to become startups and encouraging them to develop ideas that would actually help solve social problems. And that was the program called SeedPH. And now, under DICT, and because of the passage of the Innovative Startup Act, then SeedPH is a bigger program called the DSDAP. So SeedPH now is just one of the 4 components of DSDAP. So with the passage of the law, we are happy that DICT is one of the 3 lead agencies in the implementation of one whole-of-government approach program called the Philippine Startup Development Program, together with DTI and DOST. And so as I mentioned, we are actually happy that with the SeedPH that we have now 4 components. And can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so with the passage of ISA, or the Innovative Startup Act, the 3 agencies signed a joint administrative order to create a steering committee. So the steering committee is composed of the three agencies, composed of our three undersecretaries, which later on they will be speaking during the press conference. No, and so together with the three agencies, we have actually mapped out the different initiatives and programs. So as you can see here, for the DICT, our role is particularly from the formation to validation stage, or the pre-seed and seed fund. And the other, of course, part of that also will be the role of the OST. But then in the growth stage, from seed fund to investor venture capitalist stage, that will be the role of DTI. So it's really a whole of government approach to make sure that all the government agencies are aligned with all our initiatives as one Philippine Startup Development Program. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is our program. Again, a Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program with the main goal of establishing a strong Philippine startup ecosystem by providing support that will strengthen the competitive advantage of Filipino startups. And these are the specific objectives, but I won't go through each because I'm going now to the 4 components of the DSDAP. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so these are the sub-programs or 4 components of the Digital Startup Development and Acceleration Program. First is the development of the Philippine Startup website, one portal for the entire country. Then the establishment of innovation studios or co-working spaces all over the country, the provision of Startup Grant Fund, and then the creation of the InnovNation network. So I'll go through each one. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so under the law, the ISA, the DICT is mandated to develop and maintain one Philippine startup portal, wherein this will be the single repository of all information of all the Philippine startup initiatives and programs. And we would also like to encourage our private sector partners to also put a lot of information in this portal. In fact, I would like to announce that later during the press conference of the 3 undersecretaries, we are going to launch this Philippine Startup Portal. So a lot of details will be given to you later. So we're inviting everyone to join us later at 11 a.m. So the portal is actually composed of course, the different baseline information database of startups and our startup enablers. And very particular is that you can also register if you want to avail of the grants and incentives and packages of the 3 agencies. You have to go to that portal to be able to avail of those initiatives and opportunities and services. So yeah, so later we're inviting everyone to join that in the launch. Next slide, please. So this is actually the portal itself. So yeah, later on you're going to have more information about this. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Then we have the establishment of innovation studios. As you may know, before we became the ICT, we have an organization as now being part of the ICT, the Telecommunications Office, and we have utilized unutilized spaces all over the country, and we want to make use of those spaces. And these are in key areas and cities in prime locations, and we want to make use of this and develop, establish innovation studios. So the innovation studio will be equipped now with different advanced hardware and software. And this will be co-working spaces in the different parts of the country. And this will also be meetings, venues for startups who would like to avail of this, and even virtual addresses for our startups. And one also component is the provision of in-house mentors. So this will be the innovation studio. And can we go to the next slide? We're going to show you our proposed pilot. Actually, this is going to be in Baguio. So this is the proposed innovation studio, which we have asked an architect to actually help us develop this pilot. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here, so inside the studio, this will be the content. So you have one-on-one meeting rooms, you have different meeting rooms, one-on-one cubicles. And yeah, next slide, please. There, so you have conference rooms and conference venues as well. Okay, next slide, please. Then we have the Startup Grant Fund. You know, this is the first time that DICT is going to have this kind of initiative, because under the law, the ISA, we are also mandated to provide grants. So as part of, we have already developed the guidelines for the grant, and soon we are going to call for a public consultation so that we can also gather the inputs, suggestions, and recommendations of our startup partners and of course the Philippine startup community. So the grant fund will composed of course, the grant for the design, development, validation, and other activities necessary to turn your ideas into prototype and MVPs. And part of the grant will be the registration and cost in the application of processing of permits and the other certification required for your registration of the startups. And also part of the grant is the use of facilities like using our innovation studios, other equipment and services that will be accredited by DICT. And also the registration fees if the startups would like to participate in local and international events, competitions, trainings, and seminars and workshops, and other capability development activities. We are also going to provide those kinds of support. And also our endorsement to concerned government agencies to expedite the different processes of applications in other government agencies. Next slide, please. And lastly, this is the InnovNation network. As you can see, the title of our event today is the InnovNation, because the InnovNation component is the goal is to be able to establish networks of Filipino innovators across the country, from the academe, from the local government units, from the private sector, in fostering a culture of entrepreneurship and ICT, of course, mentorship and collaboration among the different partners and stakeholders. So let me go through the different activities under the InnovNation network. As I mentioned, can we go to the next slide, please? Hello. Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the Seed PH program, maybe some of you have heard about it or have participated in our previous events. The Seed PH now is the InnovNation network under this component. So we have several activities under this that include startup mapping together with Kubo, and thanks to Kubo for partnering with us. We are going to go to the different parts of the country to be able to map their locations as to theirs, to be able to assess their startup ecosystem in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, and what are the areas for development, and what are the different interventions that we can do together, not only with DICT, but other government agencies and the private sector. So can we go to the next slide, please? So Kubo and DICT, we're going to launch this because we have already selected 5 cities to be able to start the ecosystem mapping. And next year, we will have more cities to be part of this ecosystem mapping. Next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, part of the role of DICT is actually reaching out to the grassroots, bringing these startup opportunities to the countryside. So we're doing a lot of, like, for example, Startup 101. And in fact, today or tomorrow, we have this Startup 101 workshops in partnership with another national academe partner called the Philippine Society for IT Educators in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Because again, we really want to encourage, to create awareness and advocacy in terms of, you know, opening the mindsets of the students and the individuals, Filipinos in the countryside, that they can actually become startups as long as they dream big. And of course, they have to act on it. Next slide, please. Then we have Startup 101. Basically, if those individuals or Filipinos who want to pursue, who want to know further about startups, then we have the Startup 102. And we've been doing this for the past months together with our DICT cluster offices. Next slide, please. Okay, so through this InnovNation component, together with our DICT clusters and our startup community partners like Startup Village, we've been going around virtually doing startup workshops conducted by our regional offices, and we were able to conduct 24 startup workshops during the past few months in different areas in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Next slide, please. Then we have the startup coaching and mentoring. One of the challenges that our regional the countryside has been facing is, the lack of mentors. So one of the goals of the DICT is to be able to produce mentors so that those in the countryside, those startups in the countryside will also be able to tap mentors from there, not getting from Metro Manila. Next slide, please. And this one, the Mentors Bootcamp, on the other hand, this is basically for our Philippine Startup Challenge, which is a major initiative under the InnovNation network. Mentors Bootcamp is basically encouraging the professors and teachers to become mentors for their students when they participate in our annual pitching competition called Philippine Startup Challenge. In fact, can you go to the next slide? We've just done with our Startup Mentors Bootcamp in partnership with PSITE, or the Philippine Society of IT Educators. It's a national organization composed of IT professors and professionals. So actually, last week, we were able to conduct a 2-day Mentors Bootcamp for them, which actually was participated by almost 500 participants from these different teachers and professors all over the country. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'd also like to announce, as I mentioned, that we are going to have the Startup Mentors workshops. In fact, it's going to be on Thursday and Friday for Visayas, on November 22 to 23 in Luzon, and November 24 to 25 in Mindanao. So for those who are interested to participate in the Startup Mentors workshop, you can actually join us and maybe go to the DICT Facebook page and our ICT Industry Development Bureau Facebook page if you want to participate. Next slide, please. Okay, so another part of the InnovNation network is the conduct of learning sessions and conferences. And part of this will be a really partnership with our key startup partners, Impact Hub, Startup Village, Kubo. And now, as part of this component, that's why the ICT, can we go to the next slide, please? We are part of the Philippine Startup Week as as the biggest startup conference in the country. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we are doing this. As you can see, the DICT day is today. And so this is our morning session, and we'll have 2 panels for today, this morning. And then later this afternoon, as mentioned by Yusek, Manika, and Tik, everyone is invited because we are going to have our national finals for the Philippine Startup Challenge for the professional category. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Philippine Startup Challenge 2021 is really one major initiative of the DICT. So the Philippine Startup Challenge is an annual pitching competition, which used to be only for students. And we've been doing this since 2014. And we were able to, gather a lot of hundreds and thousands of students and teachers and schools that participated in this Philippine Startup Challenge 20. So, but for this year, this is going to be the first time that we have opened the challenge to the professionals. Because, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so the goal of the Philippine Startup Challenge is to be able to encourage the students, Filipinos, professionals, to create innovative and relevant ICT products and services that will help solve social problems. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, the target is really for the students and professionals. And again, the goal is to be able, so from ideation to MVP stage, to be able to establish a rich network, more startups, entrepreneurial mindsets in ICT for this particular initiative. Next slide, please. So yeah, so we have two categories for the students and the professionals. So for the students, it should have should have three members, senior high or college level students. And then for the professionals, it should be 2 to 4 members with a designated team leader. Next slide, please. Okay, for the professionals, so as I mentioned, the national finals will be this afternoon. And for the students, still open. So for those academe who are here participating, teachers and schools, would like to invite you to participate because the deadline for the submission of entries is still on December 30, 2021. Just have to submit your 3-minute video pitch and your pitch deck. But for more details, you can actually go to our DICT Facebook page and IIDB Facebook page. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the criteria in terms of viability, relevance, impact, creativity, and presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so for this year, this is the first time that we have conducted regional pitching competition because previously all entries were submitted directly to our office, to our bureau. But so to be able for the Philippine Startup Challenge to be inclusive, to encourage regional startups in the countryside. So we've done the regional pitching competition. And then from the regional pitching competition, we have done the semifinals and later the national finals. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the past 2 weeks, you've been doing this and we have actually done the 15 regional pitching competitions and 120 teams participated in those 16 regional pitching competitions. Next slide. And last November 10, because for those top one of the regional pitching competition, they have been automatically been included in the national finals. But for the second and third regional winners, we have our 27 semifinalists, and we have done actually the semifinals last November 10. So out of the 27, we have selected the 9 startup teams that will be now joining the 16 national finalists for later. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so later on, we are going to have our 25 national finalists. And thanks to our judges for joining us and for, we know you're very busy, but thank you for being with us this afternoon. Okay, so yeah, next slide, please. All right, I think, for more information about PSC, so you can see here, we have actually our portal for the Startup Challenge. So just go to our webpage, DICT, for more information. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, we just want to highlight and thank our program partners again. For many years we've been working with them. And so can we go to the next slide, please? I think this is my last slide. It's basically thanking our program partners, of course, DTI and DOST, Kubo, Idea Space, Startup Village, Microsoft, Impact Hub, Spring Valley, AWS, Spesite, Plug and Play, Ignite, Huawei, for all the great collaboration, for the continuous partnership with the DICT. And this is the last slide, I think. So thank you so much. We are actually open for collaboration for those who are with us now. If you want to partner with DICT, of course, we're open for collaboration. So just reach out to us through our IIDB page and DICT webpage. So again, thank you so much. So we'd like to thank our speakers, moderators, and for today. Again, thank you, and hope everyone will have a very productive day. Thank you.
projects of the DICT in the new normal. It is really remarkable to see how the DICT, in partnership with other stakeholders, are crafting an environment that fosters the growth and development of startups and the startup ecosystem here in the Philippines. Like yesterday, we're moving forward to a panel discussion. For today's first panel, we'll be talking about how to cultivate strong startup ecosystems across the country. And our panelists have been showcasing innovation in the countryside. This track will highlight how startups with their innovative ideas provide meaningful impact to their respective communities, taking innovations to various parts of the country. They'll be sharing best practices, challenges, contributions, and various developments to look forward to in the future. The featured startups are currently based in cities that are part of the top 1,000 in Startup Blink's ranking for the best cities for startups. To start off, we have Mr. Graham Jimenez, CEO of Hyperstacks, a startup fintech company that empowers financial institutions by providing them access to digital banking solutions. He is also currently taking his master's degree in business administration in the Ateneo Graduate School of Business. At the moment, Hyperstacks and its current partner bank, MCCB, will be launching the first mobile banking application in Northern Mindanao, which will potentially serve at least 20,000 clients of MCCB from Cagayan de Oro City. We also have Ms. Timmy De Jesus, COO of Payroller. Timmy leads the operations for Payroller, an end-to-end human resource management system for the Philippine businesses. A system analyst by skill, Timmy has led technology teams in the Philippines for 7 years, prior to being the country manager for JFDI Asia, Asia's first and longest running startup accelerator for 2 years. She devotes her spare time to being a worker bee in her parents' bee farm and taking care of their dog, Margot, residing from Cebu City. We also have Mr. King Francis Canilla, co-founder of High Meridian Technologies. King Francis Canilla is an entrepreneur who has been in the business of design, supply, construction, operation, and upkeep of auxiliary systems for more than 9 years. Being a co-founder of Shofar, he has been actively working with the municipal DRR offices to address the need of innovation to streamline the process of addressing emergency and security issues during calamities. Shofar is already available in 8 municipalities and will still continue to help other DRR offices for a better response through technology. And Mr. Mart Louis Fernando, co-founder of When in Baguio. When in Baguio started off as a digital gateway for the collated information of everything about Baguio. When the pandemic hit, shifted as a tech company and created a mobile app for on-demand food delivery for local restaurants and pasalubongs. Started with a budget of 90,000 and 2 people to a gross revenue of 5 million in 16 months and generated around 20 million worth of purchases from local restaurants. Ada, Ilocano for Meron, the super app for daily use of the North, featuring delivery, logistics, service bookings, transportation, and homestay reservations, to be launched this December 2021. As you know, residing from Baguio City. Joining us is Mr. John Dave Duenas, CEO of Highbrain. John Dave Duenas hails from Bacolod City, Negros Occidental. In 2016, JD, as he is fondly called, saw the requirement of information communications in the Philippines healthcare industry and a platform the labor market requires for homegrown talents to put into use. Seeing the big gap of the healthcare industry in terms of an available, fully integrated management information system in the Philippines and available manpower tool, JD founded Highbrain in September 2016 and provided local employment to highly skilled software developers in Bacolod City, starting from hiring 3 developers to now 45 full-time employees, and in the next year's projected a growth of 400%. In addition to managing Highbrain, JD was elected president of the Bacolod Negros Federation for Information and Communications Technology for the years 2017 and 2018. And at the spike of the COVID-19 cases in Bacolod City, JD volunteered at the Bacolod City Emergency Operations Center Task Force and established processes and procedure for data management, collection, management analysis, and assessment, wherein timely and relevant data to be used for pandemic response, which contributed to the flattening of the curve of the cases in Bacolod City. The Office of the Presidential Assistant for Visayas commended his efforts. JD holds a degree in industrial psychology from the Southern New Hampshire University and 2021 Executive Education Strategy for Healthcare Delivery from Harvard Business School. So everybody, please give a warm welcome to our wonderful panel, and again, Mr. John Dave Duenas for moderating.
So much, Mac, and I can't really be more impressed by the team that I have currently. And in as much as I would want to jump onto my first question, I would just want to thank actually Miss Emmy, the team of the DICT, Kubo, DTI, and DOST at that for staging this one. And it's pretty much like a very big thing for me in talking about digital transformation, startups in the countryside, and it's quite fleeting also to know that the DICT is launching a very strong suit in terms of programs that would be supporting our startups. Now, I would want to have this conversation with my, I would say, in co-innovators in the field, making an impact not just within our local communities but the communities nationally. And that I was trying to stalk you guys online and try to look at your profile. And coming from financial technology, providing outsourcing solutions to some clients out maybe within the country, outside of the country. Then you have one that's focused on human resource information system. There's another one that's going to be in disaster risk recovery and management, and even I'm trying to create the database for local products within a certain community. I think I would want to first ask, what made you decide to get into this kind of thing, or I should say, what pushed you on the edge to start where you are at, or I mean to start the company or to start the team that you're at? Let me first hear it with King of High Meridian Technologies.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry
Hi,
for
there you
the
go, King.
delay.
It's okay.
Okay. Well, we started as a team. There are actually 5 of us. Engineer Philman Simbao, Ronel Yap, Brian Bingil, and we've since expanded the team to include Engineer Marjan Pilar and Engineer Franch. I have to mention them because they're part of the reason that we're together, and we're still going on. The team we're still progressing. So we wanted to address the huge gap in terms of intervention, in terms of disaster intervention, for especially when we were hit by Typhoon Pablo, Typhoon Yolanda. It brought a lot of damage, not only in terms of property and lives, but the overall recovery period for that, every time disaster strikes the countryside. So right now the system is in we have at least 9 LGU adapters right now, and that's the motivation to keep going, to bring it to more LGUs.
That's quite very exciting, King. Because you highlighted it. There's 5 LGUs now that's adopting your product.
9.
9. I'm so sorry. I mean, thank you for correcting me. So I think before I would move on to the other panel members that we have, I think I would want to really emphasize even that these are startup founders that are coming from across the country. And when we say across the country, this is more on the countryside. So we have, startups coming from Cebu, Davao, Cagayan de Oro, and even from Baguio. So we're quite well represented coming from Luzon to Mindanao, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. I would want to also throw that question to Hyperstacks. What made you guys get into, fintech and offering even outsourcing solutions?
So outsourcing solutions was actually the very first type of service that we were doing, and it just so happened that we were working on a small product around 2016. Then it didn't last long, so it was just about time that we were able to to close a client that is based in Singapore, and that's helped us that helped us grow the company for the next 2 years. Then around 2018, we realized that outsourcing business is a tough business, and there's a lot of competition going, and it's almost everywhere. If you go to different cities, or even to other countries like India, there's a lot of outsourcing companies, and we felt that it's not a really unique business, and then we realized that there's an underserved market, especially in the rural banking sector, which made us realize that the rural banking sector doesn't have the right technologies to serve their clients. I mean, they do have some of them have ATMs, most of them still use passbook. However, we realized that um, the rural banking sector, I think, could provide better services through digital channels, which is in the form of web and mobile banking. So that's how we got into fintech, and it was just about time. And after a year of doing business development, when we closed our first microfinance in Albay, then and a year after, which is in 2019, I mean 2020, when we closed our first rural banking client.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark. I would want to throw this now to Payruler. I know an HR is basically like a very complex way of supporting an operations. And normally before it's more of an admin side of things, and now it moved, from an admin functionality to a strategic role. And I would want to get your thoughts in terms of what made you decide to get into it, and how was it for Payruler when you guys started?
So when we started, actually it's interesting because some of the co-founders used to work together as part of the IT team of a manpower agency. And one of the solutions that some of my co-founders built was really more around payroll. So we started with payroll, and that was because at the time, for that manpower agency, it's really payroll that is one of the headaches, right? Can you imagine thousands and thousands of people with very many different pay grades and everything? Some people are paid hourly, daily, weekly, bi-monthly, monthly. So there. So because the company, the manpower agency, took a different direction, business direction, and they no longer needed some of my co-founders. So what we did was, we realized that payroll is one of the things that is consistent with any business. All businesses do pay out payroll, right? You will always have humans in your business. So we decided to raise some seed capital. We got some angel investment, and then we built our MVP of Payruler. So that's how we started it, and we then just built our traction as we went along. Initially, we were servicing a lot of clients in Metro Manila, and that was an interesting thing for us as well, because we would be based in Cebu, but servicing mostly in Metro Manila. And that was a challenge, and it brought its own challenges, but also its rewards. We shifted. I guess it was just a lot of listening to our clients, right? So initially, we were thinking, okay, let's just build a payroll system. But more and more, our users were getting happy with the fact that, or with the way we were solving their payroll needs, and they wanted more features. Like they wanted more features on timekeeping, and they wanted more features on, databasing employee information, etc. So we found that, we were building it in a more strategic way, or aligning it to HR's role that was constantly developing into just a policy enforcer into a more active player in business strategy. And we've found and we've seen that, right, in when we hit the pandemic, where companies are really looking to HR as to how to navigate the new normal. How are they going to work from home? How are they going to get paid? How, these things. So HR has really like stepped up, especially in the past 2 years, because of everything that has happened. And so we want to go along with that.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Mark, I'll have to give it to you. What did you guys think of when you established when in Baguio, and how it had helped you guys core through the entire thing?
To be honest, we started it just as a hobby and for fun. Like we started it 5 years ago. We just wanted to have an online directory for everything in Baguio. So, but then the pandemic hit us. I was actually ready to throw in the towel during the time and come back as a pharmacist, because I am a pharmacist. But then the pandemic hit. My businesses and jobs were severely affected by the pandemic, as well as my business partner. So with 90,000 pesos left in our savings, we ventured into the competitive world of online this on-demand food delivery apps, which exploded in the pandemic. And there was a lacking in the competition, because they are not targeting, the bigger brands are not targeting the smaller stores and restaurants, and the ones that the locals really know of. So because of their high commission rates. But then we just started it as a way to get back on the horse, I think, and just to create jobs for those left out by the pandemic, because some of our initial delivery riders were taho vendors, ambulant vendors, and those that really don't know how to use cell phones.
Yeah.
So we tried to do that and partnered with a lot of local restaurants left out by the bigger competition. And it exploded. We don't know how to code, to be honest. To be perfectly honest with the whole Philippines, we didn't do our code because we don't know how to do the code for it. We just bought a source code available somewhere, and
then converted it into a product.
And then now we're developing two apps at the moment.
Okay. So I think it's When in Baguio Eats, and then the entire When in Baguio general application, if I'm not mistaken.
So there's gonna be a When in Baguio app, and the When in Baguio Eat will be the When in Baguio app.
Cool. Why am I familiar with it, Mark? Because honestly, I was in Baguio 3 weeks ago, and I was able to use your app, honestly. And it made me went through the entire thing. Now I think we're done with the technicalities of introducing ourselves and where we are at. I think from my end, my team is hailing from Bacolod. We're into healthcare IT. I think I resonate the same feeling that during the pandemic we also were in the brink of closing down and closing shop just for us to get through as what's going on. But then San Miguel got into the picture, and then the hospitals needed more of our assistance in terms of digital transformation, and that's how it is. So why am I sharing that? Because I think pretty much in what we do, in how we innovate things, we are driven with a certain problem or with a certain challenge, and we just would want to be good at what we do. The main character of a Filipino startup founder is that we wanted to push to become better at what we do. We wanted to push not just to solve an issue, but to add value to the community that we revolve in. So I think let me throw a certain topic in on the table right now, that in terms of challenges, what do you think are the most critical challenges that could make or break a startup? And honestly, I don't want to say that I feel envious or I feel jealous or I feel it's unfair, because hearing the DSDAP program of the ICT, if only during the time when we were establishing or we were starting up, it has already been there, I think it could have, gave us a good runway to push forward. But in terms of having this kind of program in place and knowing the challenges that you think are critical for the startups, how do you think would this vet the entire picture for the startup economy in the Philippines? I would want to throw it to Jesse. Timmy, I'm so sorry. Who's Jesse? Timmy, I'm gonna throw it to you. What do you think is the most critical? What do you think is the most critical, challenge for a startup, and how do you think will this be vetted on, and how the startup economy will be vetted on, knowing that we have now the DSDAP projects or programs from the DICT?
I guess, and I think all of my co-panelists here will resound that, when you're not, when you're from outside of Metro Manila, sometimes it's harder to get access to the network, be it in terms of investors, be it in terms of, enablers, in terms of even clients, right? So that would always be the challenge for startups outside of Metro Manila. But there are also advantages to being outside of Metro Manila, right? And we can talk a little bit about that. But I think those challenges, with awareness and supporting programs like this that come on board, and the great support that the ICT, the OST, DTI is really giving, then I think it's easier to bridge those, especially because, when it's DICT or DOST or DTI that's running these programs, it gives startups, all startups, not just the ones from the countryside, some sense of, legitimacy. Like you can associate yourselves with these programs and these brands, and that, it gives a seal of approval that these startups are not fly by night, etc. Because, they go through vetting, they go through programs and things like that. So then it makes it more, it adds that credibility. So I think the challenges would always be access, but these programs are there to bridge that a little bit and help out. And Payroller has definitely been a recipient of that support, those bridges.
Thank you so much for that, Timmy. Mart, I would want to throw this to you. So coming from the notes of what Timmy shared, and it's about access. It comes about, getting that feeling of being within the community, being vetted on, that, we could provide the services that we have been that we clamored to, not clamor, but we promised to deliver. But in terms of how is it now with knowing this kind of limitations currently, like if now that we are within the countryside premises, but we service national in scope, what do you think are those limitations that we have to work on as a startup that could really affect the kind of service that we will give to our clients?
To be honest, in terms of limitations, there's a lot that we're struggling, especially in terms of knowledge. With for us, in terms of permits, there's a lots of permits for this, for that. We didn't have the mentors for it. we just kind of go with the flow of things, and just started off from there. I actually applied for funding from a lot of startup pitches, events, all of which I got rejected. And
I feel you. I feel you on that side.
So for us, all of our funding came from bootstrapping. Our mentorship. I have a thick face, as you can see, and I reached out to a lot of the people that I have met from attending various startup.
I think King, let me just remind that we're on live and we're seeing everyone. So yes, Mart. If you could proceed.
So where was I again?
You're talking about mentors, talking about getting
mentorship. For us, especially for us, I'm a pharmacist. I don't know about tech. My business partner is a web developer. So he doesn't know a lot about the code for mobile apps as well, and the specific technologies needed to scale. So we had to first we had to outsource when we had the budget. We had to outsource from developers in Manila because we cannot find any developers here in Baguio.
Okay.
So if there was a program right now the ICT is doing with regards to building a strong network, maybe we could know some developers that are already here in Baguio, not to outsource it in Manila.
I thought all the while I could tell you that Graham is offering software outsourcing. So I think we could help out, and I think that's one thing I have learned with the network or within the conferences like this. We get to collaborate, we get to know what's going on, we get to help out each other. King, I would want to raise a question. I know that you're busy. I know that everyone is so busy, and I know that everyone is getting to run after something. I would want to ask, like I know that you guys are based in Davao. I have met Engineer Finmar. I have known Engineer Franch. In terms of scaling up from Davao to you're having now 9 LGUs. Were you able to go beyond the limits of not only within the Mindanao island, but you were able to penetrate the market for Visayas and Luzon? King, you're on mute. King, I think there you go. There you go.
Okay. First, sorry for the interruption.
It's okay.
I forgot. In terms of challenges, I think the rose among the thorns pretty summed it all up for us. We encountered almost the same challenge at first. So in spite of we won the 2019 National Invention Contest, an exhibit organized by the DOST, and we applied for support with TAPI. Unfortunately, they disapproved the application because they weren't able to get through but some government documents that they wanted but is not available. So it all boils down to capital investments, but that's water under the bridge now. We've since moved on. Our greatest challenge right now is more on R&D investments, because we'd like to integrate our systems with other systems like water level monitoring systems, agromet, hydromet devices that we could bring into the early warning systems. And no, we have not brought this tech to Visayas and Luzon yet. There have been a lot of feelers from other suppliers, but no, not yet. But
okay,
Mom said it all.
Thank you. I definitely feel you, because I remember during the time when we were starting also, I had to apply for even a bank loan. And for a startup, we were being asked for, a 3-year existence, 3-year positive financial statement. Like, if I have a financial statement that's positive, I don't think I needed a bank loan. I mean, that's for one. Graham, I would have to throw it to you. You guys are offering software solution, outsourcing software skills, and you have offered a fintech, and you're based in Cagayan de Oro. I think the typical challenge, as what was mentioned by Mart earlier, was actually the manpower, the skill set of people. that would be able to assist in terms of, producing or perfecting the product. How is it now in terms of the labor market, in terms of the skill set, in terms of competitive advantage as to where you are at? And is this going to be limiting also your capacity in terms of scaling up?
Yeah, that's a very good question, JD. So it's just this year, no, that we have to let go of our outsourcing model. We realized that it's very hard to scale in terms of, especially when you are trying to recruit developers with different skill sets and maintaining their levels. So what we realize is that developer, when we work with certain clients, the developer will only as good as the old project that they work with, which is very challenging. So that's why we realized that we should just focus on the fintech offering that we are doing. So in terms of ano naman sa scaling with, I mean, sa manpower, we since the pandemic, we didn't limit ourselves to only recruiting people within Cagayan de Oro. In fact, our team is very diverse right now. We have majority of the team is still based in Cagayan de Oro, but we have teams that are based in Cavite, in here in Manila, here in Makati, and there's a lot of I mean, it helped us a lot in terms of getting the right talents that could help us build our product. Especially, there are a lot of skills that may not be available in CDO simply because most companies there are also outsourcing companies and not product-based companies. But when we ventured out, when we stopped limiting ourselves to hiring only in CDO, we were able to acquire the necessary skills that could help us deliver our commitments to our clients.
Nice, nice, nice. I think pretty much it sums up the line we're in. As long as there's internet, it becomes like an
Exactly.
equalizer for everything. Maybe you're in Baguio, maybe you're in Cagayan, maybe you're in Cebu, or even in Davao. I even remember, and I would want to share this. April of last year, when we received a call from San Miguel Foundation, I was even saying, like, we're in Bacolod, we're an hour flight away from from Manila. And and during the time it was pandemic, there are no flights. So basically, it's going to take you almost 24 hours to drive from Manila to Bacolod. So if we're going to service you, I could not send my team over there, or I could not ask you to come over here because it was even in the middle of the pandemic. And luckily enough, we were only given 2 months, and by July 4, we had to launch the first automated COVID-19 testing center in the country under the San Miguel Foundation, and we were able to service that. Why am I sharing that? Because I think it was more on trying to understand that really location is not going to be taken as a limitation, but instead, wherever you are, as long as you have the grit, as long as you have the right pool of people, as long as you have the right, passion to work on, I think you're going there. And I think my next question is more into that kind of line of thought. Knowing that you guys are from the countryside, I mean, I am also, not you, but all of us are from the countryside, and how we were able to, master the proof that we could build a startup anywhere. What do you think should be, what can you share to those people, or, young minds, inquisitive minds, or I'd definitely say, and don't quote me on this, crazy minds, to think of starting a company or starting a product or starting an idea? And I would want to take on the minds of Timmy, because I think she was smiling. Let's first throw it to Timmy. What do you think should be, like, a perfect line for young founders that is in the brink of being crazy enough to start something big?
Well, if you do think and you validated that you have a problem worth solving, then, I wouldn't automatically say, like, jump into it, but I do encourage, like, you to really validate and try it on the side. And if it works, then really focus on it. I think also that you need to leverage on the strengths that you have, and the strengths that we have, being where we're located. but at the same time, be also prepared to work double time on the challenging areas if you're where we're located, right? So really work double time and do a lot of work in terms of creating a network, joining a network, being affiliated, looking out there for opportunities. That's the given. We're gonna have to work harder, but it's possible. So I think, if you're ready for that challenge, then go ahead and jump in it. But yeah, so I think that's what I have to say.
Thanks, Timmy. How about you, Graham? What do you think should be something that they have to ponder on when they are having that kind of idea and they would want to jump on it?
Yeah, I guess contrary to Timmy, I might have to tell them they to just start now, especially like what we were doing back then. We none of us in the team knows how to build a mobile banking application, and none of us even understand what the BSP requirements are when you want to launch a mobile banking application. So, well, we were crazy enough to pitch the idea, and see how the market would respond to it. Luckily, there was a lot of interest happening, but none of those interests back then was enough to sign a contract. And it took us 2 years to work on the idea before we landed our first contract. But I think it's really worth it, especially that you are really working on a problem that is existing, and it's not just a problem that is it's hypothetical. So the interesting part for me is that if you have an idea of solving a problem, just do validation, customer validation, as soon as possible. Then don't be afraid if the results of your customer validation is the complete opposite of what you are expecting, because that's where you will learn. That's where you will learn that what your idea may not be the best, is not the best idea to solve this problem. So you need to be open, and you need to have the willingness to adapt to changes.
Thank you so much, Graham. I think I feel you when you say that at times it's easier to, commit your mistakes now before even launching it to the client, because committing a mistake and having the client within the equation is going to be more fatal and more costlier, or costlier, if I may say. King, I'll throw that question to you. There are young minds right now listening to us. What do you think should be the kind of line of thought, the kind of grit, or the line of inspiration that they should have, knowing that we're all from countryside? We are proof that we do not need to be in Manila, we do not need to be in big cities to start our group. What do you think should be given to them, or how should you inspire them to have that? Yeah, I think you are on mute again.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
They have to join all the science fairs.
Okay. Okay. So basically, it's just really more on getting network and exposures. Correct?
Well, we started in the regional invention contest. Then we won the national. But even with that seeming success, you still have to trust in your team. It's the team that drives everything, and you should not stop inventing things, creating things.
Thank you.
Keep on.
Yeah, I think, King, it's really more on stop being a consumer, but instead be a producer, or be a manufacturer. We have to stop having that kind of concept or kind of mindset that we're just good to be consumers. Mark, I'd have to throw it to you. What do you think should our startup founders, or young startup founders, if I may say, well, we're still young, should have in mind in terms of, pushing for an idea or before launching an idea to become a product?
First is do not be afraid.
Okay.
Definitely, specifically, do not be afraid to make mistakes because it's part of the learning process. For us, we had a lot of mistakes and we're correcting it as we go on. And we're learning from all of those mistakes as we go on. And do not be afraid to compete against the bigger players. Because for us, we're trying to compete with one of the biggest super apps in Southeast Asia and one of the number one food delivery app in the world. But we're increasing our market share bit by bit because we were not afraid to go against these bigger players because there's an inferiority from the people in the countryside towards the so-called Imperial Manila.
Okay.
So do not be afraid. Yeah, don't be afraid.
Yeah, I think I agree with you totally. Normally when we get to compete with big players in the market, we think already that we can't we can't even consider the term compete with them. But you're right. Knowing that you have an edge, knowing that you have a unique identifier is something that you have to work on. We have a question from the audience, and I would want to raise this to any one of you who would want to. And I think I'd have to throw this to Timmy, and knowing that HRIS is quite a very saturated market, if I may say. There was this question that says, how did you validate your idea and made you jump and lead the idea to become a product? And also, how did you protect your idea from other people you talk the idea with? Meaning it's more of how did you work on the factor that there could be an area that they could, steal the idea from you? And did you file it as an intellectual property? And Timmy?
Right. So as I narrated earlier, we started with solving, sometimes in project management, there's a critical path, right? What are the things that are the really need to be solved to be able to achieve that whole cycle? Number two is we focused on what gave our users a headache. What is the thing that they repeatedly do most and we can automate easily with process? So we built that critical path and kind of was able to complete the cycle. And it's more because they were happy with it. And when we then repurposed that and sold it to a different company, they were able to use it. So that's how we kind of validated that, okay, this works. And with our experience of my co-founders, they already had 10 years of process automation experience for HR before, we kind of put in that experience and built on that, marrying that with whatever feedback we would get from the client. So it is a very iterative process. It's not it's not a one-time thing. Payruler has gone through so many versions depending on what we learn at the time. So that's how we did validation. It's similar to what my other co-panelists here did is, you do it, you execute, and then you figure it out after. No. Second is, how do you prevent people from stealing your idea? You really can't, to be honest. You also have, I think, something that I learned in a lot of startup programs is really ideas can be stolen, but it's your execution that matters.
I totally agree. Ideas.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Timmy.
It's really in your execution. Execution. I think you know that, JD, right? Building a health management system, all of these, there's so many in the market, but it's all about your execution and what makes you different in that execution. That will matter. That will put you up on a different level. So yes, we did do filing. There are parts of Payruler that have been protected, that we've worked on the IP of it. But generally, it'll boil down to that. It's the execution. It shouldn't prevent you from being so afraid to talk about your idea, talk to different people. there has to be something in your, there has to be something in as like a secret sauce in your execution that will make you different, I think.
I totally agree, Timmy. When you said that, ideas, honestly, I always tell my team about it whenever we do ideation process within, a certain new functionality, that ideas are cheap. I mean, anybody could come up with a good idea, but you're right. Executing that idea to become a product would become your unique identifier in the market. And I think what I would add on to that is that normally startups are so focused pitching the product or pitching the idea or pitching the app to an investor. But they forget that investors are just going to be focused on getting their monies back. But the idea should always be you pitch your product to a client, because the client will not only pay for it, but automatically give you an honest feedback. Because if the product will not be working at their advantage, meaning it doesn't solve the issue that you're trying to solve or solve the problem that you are providing solutions into. Graham, I would want to throw this to you. We mentioned earlier, kasi, that in reality, startups outside Metro Manila face a bit more challenges. And I think Director Emmy pointed it out that there are already a lot of initiatives being done at the moment from the side of the ICT in terms of the assistance that we could give to the startup founders. You think there should be a focus on bridging or giving access to the startup founders in terms of the requirement? For example, when it comes to paperwork, the fact that for a lot of agencies, you need to be there in person and or send printed documents, which are very ironic in this digital age. What do you think is your stand on this kind of statement?
Well, if in terms of access, no, I think yeah, it's, for example, for a simple startup, it takes a lot of legwork to register the business, even the business. So regardless if it's DTI or SEC, getting all those permits, it's a very daunting task and could really take a couple days of your year. And I think with in terms of providing access to startups with those kind of services, that would be very helpful, especially that so that startups would have to focus on what they really should be doing, which is solving a problem and not doing all those paperwork. I think on our case, we're just fortunate enough that we were able to hire people who can do the legwork for us. But for some startups who were not that privileged to start with, probably they would really have a hard time even registering their business name and, and all those stuff about legalities.
Yeah, I thank you for that, Graham. And I think we had also to highlight that in the Startup PH portal that Director Annie pointed out earlier, there's already a startup one-stop shop, or SBOSS, that basically, covers all of this. How I wish during the time when I was starting Highbrain, I have already this at the tip of my fingers. It could have,
It would exactly.
It could have given us a lot of sleeping hours instead of us trying to run after things. King, I would want to ask your stand, because you mentioned earlier that there was supposed to be, a grant or investment that you were trying to work on, but there was this document that was not, provided, or a legal document that was not given. And in support, or to piggyback the statement of Graham earlier, what do you think is the effect of this kind of requirements, especially when they are trying to get it from startup founders like us? Your mic, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a notice to proceed document.
There.
Notice to proceed. So the DOST TAPI was asking us to furnish them with a copy of the notice to proceed with our project in Panabo City, LGU Panabo City.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, even the city legal already provided them with the opinion that there's no notice to proceed when it's a goods, when it's a supply of goods. So it should only be the notice of award. Well, I'm not sure how to directly address your question, but our point is, This is only for the we're only saying this for the benefit of future startups, no. Sometimes when you deal with government, there are layers and layers of bureaucracy that you have to go through. Well, don't lose heart. Uh, Again, I'm going back to the previous message of keep going. Still, you still have to have faith in government. Those are just lapses. We're sharing this because maybe you'll go through those experiences also yourselves. But no, keep going.
Thank you so much, King. I could sense some frustration in you, but I feel you. Dealing with the government is quite a very tedious process, and there are so many bureaucracy that you have to deal with. Mark, you keep on smiling when we were discussing challenges earlier. What's your what's your 2 cents on it?
Uh, uh, I did the job for like 10 people when we were starting. I was the sales, I was the marketing, I was the HR, I was in charge of rebranding and all of these things. So especially the funding, when our permits cost us already around 20,000 when we were starting from our 90,000 budget. So that's around almost 20% of our budget already for permits. And now I think we have to have a license to operate for courier services for our app. And I think one of the requirements from DICT is we have to have like 500,000 to 1 million in our bank account
Oh,
as a deposit for it. So I think it's called PEMEDES. So
mhm.
there's a lot of when it's a roller coaster ride. It's like when you guys are speaking, there's a flashback in my mind of of all of the challenges that our team went through along the way to be able to get to where we are right now.
I, I feel you. I feel the frustration of King. I know the limitations that Graham was pointing out earlier. Timmy pointed that out clearly also in terms of validation. And Mart, I could still just see you're smiling and all of these issues. But I think pretty much what we have to consider really is that the Philippines is a young country in terms of the digital startup ecosystem. And what I really appreciated is the fact that, a lead organization like the Department of Information and Communications Technology pointed out earlier that there is this DSDAP program that I would always harp on it, that if during the time when we were starting, if it was already there, I think I could have like more runway that we would be needing. But not discrediting the fact also that during this time, it's what we needed. Not just because of the pandemic, but I think it's because the changing of guards in terms of times, in terms of digital transformation, in terms of the fourth industry revolution, pointed out that, innovative startups are actually one of those people that would be needing to spearhead or lead the way. I even remember when I was talking to a friend last night that I said, startup founders are seen to be those crazy people, but these are visionary people who dreams for a better future. And how I wish there would be a president next that's going to be a startup founder. And I think pretty much we would be on the right track in terms of, supporting digital transformation. But to wrap it all up, I think what we have shared this morning is to really how we have identified our own journey, our own challenges, which I think could already be met or could already be closed in terms of gaps by the programs that is being set, not just by the government, but the agencies. Like last year, we were talking about the startup law or the Startup Innovative Act. But these kind of things are already in place. So I think we're pretty much there. So I am just going to give you guys 30 seconds because I'm being reminded that we are doing overtime for your last message to all of our startup founders before we would make it, we call it a day already for our panel. Let's start with King. Just a 30-second message to all of our startup founders.
Well, keep creating, and the rest of the time I'll use to thank my team for the University of Southeastern Philippines, and my other partners, Engineer Phil Matsimpao, Engineer Franch, Engineer Pilar, Brian, Ronel, and Joanne. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, King. How about you, Graham? 30-second message.
Yeah. So just just be crazy enough to start things, and the most important thing is you start now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, Graham. How about you, Mark?
It's just a short message to my fellow startup co-founders and to those struggling. Hang in there. Hang in there.
Thank you. Thanks for that. How about you, Timmy?
Well, entrepreneurship is really hard. Everyone has said that, but it doesn't have to be lonely. So always connect with, networks like this, and find the help you need. It's available if you look.
Thank you. And for me, I guess before I will close it down and turn it over to Mac, is that when you get a chance to start something, take it as a chance to improve the lives of the people around you. When you face the challenges and you face a struggle and you think it's the end, always go back to your why as to why you've started it. And I think that's it for us. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Timmy. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Martin. And thank you, King. I'm giving it back to you, Mac.
Thank you so much to the wonderful set of panelists from the first track of the panel discussion. I'm glad to see that innovation isn't just concentrated in big cities and that we're cultivating curiosity, entrepreneurial thinking, and collaboration across the Philippines. And as these panelists mentioned, the process isn't easy. There will be challenges along the way. But as Sir JD also brought up too, we're lucky to be born at the time of the internet, the great equalizer. Limitations shouldn't be considered because of your location. Wherever you are, as long as you have the drive, determination, and passion, like our commendable panelists right there, you will find a way to grow your startup. Moving forward to the second panel discussion, career panel from school to startup. This discussion will focus on young entrepreneurs that have successfully walked the path from student to successful entrepreneur. For this talk, we'll be joined by Mr. Ryan Lamoso, co-founder of Rental B and Alternative Housing Group. Rental B is a platform that aims to connect student renters and property owners by providing the best technology to find and rent spaces online, as well as enabling roomies to book and move in with convenience. While Alternative Housing Group is a real estate tech startup incubator and a prop tech builder in the Philippines. He was one of the winners for the last Philippine Startup Challenge back in 2019. Joining him is Mr. Victor Rivera, the co-founder and CEO of Avion School. Avion School is a startup that teaches Filipinos to become remote software engineers globally. An alumni of Y Combinator, Silicon Valley's #1 tech accelerator, which incubated companies like Airbnb, Stripe, and Reddit. His previous experience includes becoming the first non-technical hire of Paymongo and working in companies like Lalamove, Carousel, Honestbee, and WeClean. Joining them is Mr. Jesse Manalansan, CTO of Quickwire. Mr. Jesse and Quickwire is a leading fintech startup in the Philippines that has raised nearly $4 million funding from the local and foreign VCs. Quickwire started with enterprise fintech, but is now expanding to SMEs and B2B payments. Jesse received his degree in the Bachelor of Science in Information Technology at Mapua University. As a CTO of Quickwire, he leads both the engineering and product teams, responsible for conceptualizing and developing the technology and features for its clients. Prior to him becoming full-time at Quickwire, Jesse started out as an intern back in 2014. And joining them as well is Mr. King Alan D, co-founder and CEO of Expedoc. Expedoc is the AI-powered automation service behind some of the major players in the global supply chain. King is a former researcher from Stanford University and comes from a family in cross-border logistics. He ran an international import-export business while graduating from Stanford with an engineering degree. His international team is spearheading a new generation of logistics that is driving a new approach to the benefits of supply chain technology and the optimization of global freight forwarding. And joining them is Miss Audrey Pett, the founder and executive director of A Woman in Tech. She is a sophomore at Stanford University and the founder and executive director of WeTech, a nonprofit organization based in the Philippines that aims to educate, inspire, and empower youth to break gender barriers and use tech to make a difference in society. Through WeTech, she has been working on projects at the intersection of technology and education since she launched the organization at age 15. Now 20, her time is mostly spent going on partnership calls, speaking at webinars, and coordinating with WeTech's 20 plus chapters in 10 plus countries on how to break the gender and accessibility gaps in tech. Her work with WeTech has garnered her recognition as a 2020 Gen T Leader of Tomorrow, 2019 Global Teen Leader, 2020 Pinterest Council of Courage member, 2018 Zonta Young Women in Public Affairs District Awardee, Technology 2019 Zonta Women in Technology Asia Pacific District Scholar, Opportunity Desk 30 Under 30 Changemaker, 2020 Women in IT Advocate of the Year finalist, and 2019 a Women in Tech Global Aspiring Teen Award finalist. A three-time TEDx, ASEAN, and UN speaker, she has delivered over 100 talks and has also been featured in local and international publications like Forbes, Esquire, and Elite Daily. Her work was also highlighted in the 2020 United Nations Girls Education Initiative documentary. Students, teachers, and parents, this is definitely a session you don't want to miss. So stick with us and please give a warm welcome to our wonderful panelists and moderators.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introductions. I'm really excited to be moderating this panel on school to startup. And as a student myself, really excited to just jump right in. And I just like to ask everyone to tell us more about your startup and what inspired you to engage in the startup path relatively early on.
Should I
We
start?
can go in anyone that would like to start can go ahead.
Great. So I'm Victor, co-founder CEO of Avian School. Avian School is basically an online school that teaches Filipinos to become remote software engineers globally. Like the whole vision for us is we want to find untapped talent here in developing markets like the Philippines and be able to help them find those global jobs. While we're currently focused a lot on placing people here in like the top software companies locally, we've also been highly aggressive in being able to place people outside also. So I guess that gives you a rundown in mine.
Right, I can jump in. So at Expodoc, what we're focused on is we're trying to solve the biggest problem in global trade, which is the fact that all of this information is siloed, it's stuck in unstructured formats. And so the world's largest logistics businesses are not using this data effectively to move goods efficiently. And so we're automating all of this manual work for them so that they are able to do so.
I can go next. Our company is Quickware. So, or some of you may know it as Acquire. So what we do is basically we provide the technology and tools for property developers to expand internationally. So we provide them software such as what we call payment portals. And then we also have dashboards for them for reporting tools. And then if you're into more and custom and complex solutions, we provide them APIs. And then by early next year, we're actually going to be releasing webhooks.
All right. Well, first of all, I would like to thank DICT, DOST for having me here. I'm Ryan, CEO of Rental B. So first of all, I would like to say that before introducing Alternative Housing Group, the other company, Rental B is my baby. It's our first startup. Well, basically, it's a platform for student housing. Currently, we are the #1 student housing platform, having listed hundreds of units and thousands of users in the web platform. we are also helping universities get back to face-to-face classes, just as what we did this year with CEU and UNTIP for their medical students by providing safe and quality accommodations. So, and on the other hand, Alternative Housing Group is a venture builder. We focus on building prop tech platforms and smart cities. So currently we are helping to develop the Silicon Valley of the Philippines, which is called Sinigang Valley. It is a street here in Poblacion, Makati, wherein it is a Filipino initiative community that is creating this startup technology hub. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, speakers, for your responses. And for future reference, in the following questions, if you could go in that same order, that would be great. You all clearly have identified problems that you wanted to help solve using your startups. But how did you even arrive at identifying such problems? And how can other young people that are interested in creating their own startups identify such problems and really work on them?
I think two stories there. I've always wanted to build a startup ever since I was in college, at least before I dropped out. But being the technical founder in the Philippines well, at least searching for a technical founder in the Philippines was practically impossible, let alone for a college student with no network. So I think ever since I started, it's always been the case that I've never been able to start something just because no one could actually build it. You have like this really big idea, this huge and like crazy good business model, but you can't make it work. It later like dawned on me when I was working at PayMongo, where I guess it became very, very apparent when we were speaking to a lot of people. So we were trying to get everyone to integrate with our APIs. We just launched PayMongo back then. We were relatively early in the space, and I don't think there was actually an API-based product back then. So what we tried to do was you were going to our customers one by one, trying to get them to integrate with this like a few lines of code so that they could accept online payments. And what ended up happening was none of them could integrate with our APIs. It's much better now, but back then it was very, very difficult. And what we had to do was we needed to start partnering with a lot of these dev shops. But even then, like that couldn't cater to the demand that the entire market needed. So what we did was Luis and Francis went to me one day and they said, like, why don't we try to figure out a way to churn out more engineers? So why don't you try to teach people how to become engineers and then only ask them to pay once they're hired? And the idea was crazy to me back then because I also had the same problem. Like I couldn't code myself. I'm a failed coder. I've tried to do all these online courses, but it was a huge enough problem that I needed to solve it. So that's sort of like how we came about with the idea. And like a few months, like almost 2 years later, we've been able to pass on engineers to over 100, like almost 100 startups all over the world. So I guess that's the story of how we got the idea.
Right. Awesome one, Victor. I think, I totally agree with that a lot of the problems just happen to occur around you through these various experiences that you may have as an individual. So for me, me and my friends, we do a lot of import, export, lots of logistics. And so my co-founder, Jeff, for example, he would actually, he's worked at a freight forwarder based in Manila, Shanghai, and he actually had the process documentation, and he would send me photos of this stack of documentation, pretty much this high on top of his desk that he would have to just go through, do all of that manual work. And so, yeah, we were talking about it, and eventually we thought of automating that because we realized that there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people globally doing that every single day.
Yeah, thanks, King. Yeah, in my case, so as mentioned earlier, I started out as an intern at Quakeware back in 2014. So, actually, just a bit of story. So At the time, the business model was still different. The company was doing something the likes of Payoneer business model, where one of the value prop was to become one of the preferred methods for freelancers to receive payments from anywhere in the world. So then it did not work out, so we weren't getting any traction. So like I think that was around 2015 where we pivoted to our current business model now, where we became a cross-border payment platform for property developers. Like at the time, parang when I was an intern, when before we pivoted, parang our CEO actually asked, ano, itutuloy ba natin ito? Then being young back then, nothing to do and maybe nothing to lose, we told yes. So eventually, we were able to build our MVP. It was just a simple web page, like to collect personal and payment information. And then it's integrated with a gateway for card acceptance. And then we pitch it to clients. And then seeding months later, like we attend networking events. We eventually got our like an angel investor around early January of 2015. So, yep, that's it.
Cool. Very inspiring stories. Well, for me, we started way back when we were in college, my brother and I. So basically, we live near University Belt, but then we always had a plan to move out, to feel, number one, feel independent. The second one is to, walk near our school. And the third one is to bring our girlfriends with us. But no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding on the last part. But yeah, when we were let's say finding for a space in the University Belt, we knocked on all the doors that has a signage room for rent. So basically, you will experience welcome by either a barking dog or a male landlord. So a male landlord will not typically entertain basically a male renter. So that is very traumatizing for us because we experience a lot of banging doors in front of us. And then back then, we don't want that to happen to anyone or to any of our college friends. So what we did is we consolidated all the properties, all the units that are available in the University Belt, and created a platform or a website using WordPress. So basically, our MVP is WordPress. We are proud of that. It cost us nothing, but it gained us thousands of users and generated us hundreds of units, which made all our users happy because they find their perfect space for them, something that accommodation that they think they belong. And landlords are very happy too because we generated revenue for them. So basically, when we said that, I think it's around 2018, after 6 months of launching the web platform using WordPress, we told our other teammates that, okay, this is time to step up. So basically, that's the time where we entered into a lot of competition and fundraising rounds. Back to you, Audrey.
Really inspiring stories. Thank you so much. I noticed that the common element with all of your anecdotes is that starting or identifying a problem has to be something that you feel very personally rooted in. And I think that for a lot of young people, at least here at university right now, I'm a sophomore, and I hear about a lot of students being very like excited and invested in problems in their community and wanting to like use startups to help solve those issues, which is something that I think they're on the right track on based on all of your stories about identifying those problems and then actually executing them into a tangible solution. On that note, I'd love to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of entering the startup field as a young person. I say this because in the media, we really see kind of this glorification of startup culture for young people. And there's that tendency to read, all these stories and headlines. And I'm guilty of doing this as well, about like very young founders. And at times, yes, it can be motivating, but can also be very intimidating. So I'd love to get all of your thoughts on what are the pros and cons of entering the startup space as a founder specifically, or also just as like a founding team member at a young age.
I think like the main advantage, if anything, and I think this is something that both my co-founder John and I learned through time, was the fact that you're coming into the process of building a product without prior experience. John does this a lot better than I do. Coming right, like he just came out of college and went straight to building Avian School. On my end, I've been working for the past 4 years. The thing with that is you're trying to build this product and you try to overcomplicate it with a lot of different things. You try to think about what are the departments that I have to do, what are the legal processes that I have to set up, who are the people we have to speak to, who are the connections that we have to build if you want to actually build this product. And the core of what you want to do is you actually want to build product and talk to your users. We weren't doing that initially. On the other end, like, the good thing there, like I was mentioning, was the fact that if you're coming in with zero experience, you're not really thinking about all the complexities. You're only thinking about what do we have to get done in order to launch fast and scale fast. That's exactly I guess if one thing that might be the main advantage of it. I do think there's a huge disadvantage also to launching too fast too early. And I think that the main thing there is that you're coming with zero experience, and I think the best experience that I have, and I think the most troubling experience that I had before was I was running a team of 30 at 21. And when you're coming out of college, especially if you're coming from a good university here in the Philippines, is that people will tell you that you're worth something and you're meant to succeed and you're all that. When you really don't have any experience. So what ended up happening there was we ended up failing. it was really difficult because we had to lay off like half the team. And when you're 21 and you have to speak in front of people who are paying for everyone's salaries, I don't think you really get the impact of like how much it affects people's lives. And your decisions now aren't really the same decisions that you're making back then, back when you were in college, where you might make a decision, there's really no impact to it. But now that you have to lay off people, that has like financial implications towards their families or like towards their future as well. So you do have to think about those two things. You can be very like ambitious and really build that product very early on and without having regard, and that'll help you launch the product faster and gain your users faster. But at the same time, if you don't put a lot of thought into it, you might actually make some bad decisions that not only affect you, but affect the people around you. So I'm sure like the other speakers here have a lot more experience also. So I guess, King, you can go next.
Sure, I was on mute. Also, there's a question for Victor. Do we tackle those at the end or?
Yeah, so we can do everyone's responses to the question about the pros and cons of starting early, and then we can jump into that one.
For sure. Yeah, so I guess on the comment about, young people founding all of these crazy ventures, definitely agree. And I think there's a lot of pressure, especially probably for you who's at Stanford right now. Back when I was there, I feel like literally every 18-year-old had raised millions of dollars at that point. And when you look at the news, right, it's also like that. There's a lot of these massive ventures being started by some of the youngest people with no experience, right? But I think experience comes in a lot of forms, right? It could be that hackathon project you worked on and led your team to build. It could be this school project, that you really bought into and invested a lot of time into. And I think, yeah, those experiences are loosely translate to what it would be like, very loosely translate to what it looks like to build a successful, a growing technology company at the very least. And I guess when you really think about it, what's the best way to learn how to build a technology company, a successful one, is really just by trying it out, right? When you look at the successful founders, you only really hear about their one big startup or 2-3 big startups if you're Elon Musk. But generally speaking, all of these founders did have a lot of ventures beforehand where they were significantly smaller wins, right? Like for Mark Zuckerberg, I don't think anyone even really talks about, was it Hotwire or something like that? People don't even know the name, right? But then everyone obviously around the world knows Facebook. And it's pretty much the same for all of those other successful tech founders. So it's really about just getting out there, working on something you're passionate about. And yeah, all of those learnings will translate across the ventures that you will do in your life.
In my opinion, starting young is more of an advantage rather than disadvantage. Especially in my case, coming from an IT or engineering background, I had a once in a lifetime opportunity working in this company. Like to start from nothing and then to where it is now. Like I had the opportunity to support my co-founders in pitching the business idea, the financials, the investors, why I mostly help uncovering like any product or technical aspects or any questions that may arise regarding that. And then like it's wonderful to see how like to see a team of like 3 to 4 people to now a team of 50 plus and still growing. So I think working in a startup or like starting your own business, while you're young, you have more than enough time to fail and learn from it. And then I think when you're young, you can also like quickly pick up on the certain industry you want to be in or like you want to master. Hopefully you'll see certain patterns or like how the community evolved from how it is before and how it is now. And then I think it also helps you build your character, and then like you'll know what to do and not to do in the future. And then while you're young, I think maybe you have nothing to lose. Like you're gonna have lots of learning opportunities and failures. So just keep moving forward.
I actually agree with all my co-panelists here. We all know that starting young is an advantage. I think one of the biggest advantage of that is that you have all the time in the world. So you can commit a lot of mistakes and learn from it. And I guess if you ask me personally on a personal note basis, I would say I will not start a company at a later stage of my life. Probably you will just something like ask me if I would enjoy life or start a company again. It's like what Elon Musk's friend said. It's like eating glass and staring into the abyss. So it's basically true. I mean, if you're young, you have all this energy, time. Of course, it doesn't matter if you fail or not, as long as you learn. You can actually try again, pivot some things, adapt. So well, basically for me, I know that all of us here, my co-panelists and students who are listening to us right now, we all know that starting young is an advantage. It's like playing poker and you have all these chips with you, and you know that you have more chips than the other player, and you can be patient and wait until you have the perfect card and go all in. So basically, that's how you become successful. And I guess in the shortest phrase, like what Jesse mentioned, it's more of like you have nothing to lose but everything to gain. And when you are young.
Yeah, I think just to add also like being young, you get to learn with more experienced people around you.
I agree. They're more open, on teaching you things, and actually committing mistakes is just nothing for them. So they're more like help. I mean, startup organizations and communities right now, they love helping young people, and I guess those people who went there already are very hands on teaching young people how to do it, how to start your own company and such. So it's very it's an advantage.
Yeah, I think building on that, like the power of mentorship is just so strong. And I think there's really a lot of value in putting yourself out there, connecting and cold messaging people, asking for advice. I know when I was studying my nonprofit, I was very lost in that I had no idea at 15 what I was doing. So in order to like figure out organizational structure and funding and applying for grants and whatnot, like Google, LinkedIn, like those are my best friends. And I found that through reaching out and just sending a cold message, cold email, I was able to learn so much. So to everybody watching that may seem like or may feel very hesitant and thinking like, oh, where do I even start? Like I think the best place is to like reach out to somebody that is on a similar path or has done some things that you admire and just tell them why you admire the work that they do and reach out from there. That might work for you. I know it definitely worked for me and was very integral in my project's success. So I noticed that with all the speakers, we touched on the topic of failure and how failure is really necessary, or it's a necessary experience, and it's something for better or for worse everybody has to go through, especially in the startup world. And based on that, I have a question about that, but I just remembered that we actually have a specific question for Victor that I would like to touch on. And the question goes that Zuit is a competitor of Avion School. What do you think is your edge? Asking, since this person I'm asking the question might consider studying soon. So Victor, I'll hand it off to you.
Well, I think if for one, we place a lot of emphasis on helping people get hired. The thing with us is that we don't actually want to get paid back until you're making a high salary as a software engineer. And this is something that we've always believed in the start. Personally, also for myself, is that I actually dropped out of college because I felt like there was no advantage to actually having a college degree in the end. So what ended up happening was, what ended up usually happening is you go to school, you pay your tuition, and in the end, they don't really help you get a job. For us, we do this thing called an income share agreement. What we try to do is that you only have to pay us back once you're hired. And through this method, we've actually seen a lot of people change their lives. We've seen call center agents do it. We've seen chefs do it. We've seen people who graduated with a computer science degree do it and make 5 times more than the market rate. So there, if you want to apply, feel free to check us out, avionschool.com, and you don't have to pay anything. Only pay once you're hired.
Yeah, I want to add on to that. I think it's better coming from a customer, right? So when Victor says that they really try to help you look for a job, I absolutely agree with this. Any resume from Avion School that I go through, it directly goes to me as the CEO of the company. And this is because Victor will really message every single tech CEO that gives a good salary, and we'll ask you to interview them. So if you go for Avion School, go get educated, then apply to Expodoc too.
You heard it from the speakers themselves. Go check out Avion. Thank you so much. And to touch on the question that I was mentioning earlier about failure, I would love to know from each of the speakers, what is one time, or what you would consider like the biggest failure in your startup career so far, and how did you overcome it?
Biggest failure? I guess like the biggest failure for me, I wouldn't say it was at Avion School. It was definitely back in a previous startup that I ran. And it was really coming in with zero experience. I guess like for one, the piece of advice I'd give all the young founders here is that you want to read your contracts. You don't want to get sued at a young age. But I think the failure there was the fact, and I mentioned it a while ago, was that I let down a lot of people. I was too busy focusing on the life of being a startup founder. I was so focused on the idea that you want to live a sexy life in front of all your Facebook friends. You want to become that successful guy at such a young age. And I definitely did that. And the previous startup that we ran was definitely a very traditional small business. And my idea of running a startup was you want to have a really fancy office. So we ended up getting an office in one of the fanciest buildings in BGC. And it was overlooking the entire skyline. And that didn't work. That was building a startup for me. I didn't know that you actually had to do something and actually sell your product. We ended up spending all our money in the office, and zero money was spent growing the business, and that affected a lot of people. I guess like over time, not with me, but people were able to solve that problem, and but that experience did teach me a lot. It taught me a lot about like managing a team, being able to understand their motivations, and not everyone wants to become this crazy billionaire, for example. Everyone has different reasons for wanting to work. And that didn't make as much sense to me back then, early on. It definitely has changed now. So that was a failure to me.
I think for me, it was on a previous startup as well. Back in when was that? Right out of high school, I took a gap year and worked on a startup. I think I made a couple key mistakes there, and you realize that, hey, I'm not just in school anymore. These people actually, you have a lot of people relying on you for their livelihood. You have large businesses, if it's B2B, right? That are relying on you on delivering, right, on what you promise. And it's I think there are a lot of negative things that could happen, right, from your various actions as a founder that are definitely worth considering. That said, at the same time, you gotta make a couple of mistakes to actually learn something new. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to commit and make those mistakes. I'm done.
Regarding failure, so Quickware is my first job. So I've never started a company yet. I guess one story I can recall is maybe it's about not really rejection. So here's the story. So like early days in the company, like we were pitching our solution to one of the biggest property developers here, and then like so they liked the idea, the management people, the accounting and treasury teams, and then like there was one question that who else is using this. So basically we're a startup, right? And then like we basically had um, no traction, and then like we did not have like the financial like the traditional VCs that we have now before. So like after that like presentation, like it was a cold conversation already. Like they stopped responding to emails for a while, and then so basically after that we just kept moving forward, like to build a product and scale it more. And then in terms of like the market, we eventually decided to start with some small scale property developers, then work our way up. Like when we got connections with angel investors and incubators, accelerators, then that's where we eventually got connections to get to the more like mid-sized and large scale property developers. And then it goes on after, like once you get like the top three, like others will follow. So I guess the lesson there is just maybe don't take rejection as like don't stop there. Just take it as a lesson, like more challenge, like to maybe build your product more and establish it.
Cool. Actually, I'm inspired and awed at the stories that my other co-panelists mentioned. We didn't know, of course, that they have they also have failures before, because it's not, it's not written in our bio, it's not in our social media. So basically, love the honesty there. And I think for me, the biggest lesson for them is more of like being adaptive and resilient, because I think those are the key, I think, key skills or key um KPIs, I guess, for success, and we're seeing it now actually, during this pandemic. I think startups who have been, able to survive the entire course of the pandemic is the one who really becomes the champions, basically. So, but yeah, going back to the question, I think one of my biggest failure is hiring a friend, best friends before, asking them to become my co-founders. Because if you've been to school and you haven't really had that experience working in a company or in a different organization, you only have basically your classmates or your schoolmates as your network, and you try to really um, get them along with you. So for me, it's more of like, you should ask yourself if you have the same values, the same, let's say, efforts, or the same direction, the same vision. And I guess um, how we change that course is that, to really talk to them directly and tell them that maybe this is not working for us. And it's like breaking up, but you have to break it up earlier, because I guess the relationship will be affected if you try to really make things work, if even if it's not really working. So I guess for us, it's more of like, um, who are these people that we really need to hire? Is it do we can we get outside our circles, and maybe try to stay away from friends, because it's really difficult. But right now I still have friends with me, and we had a good relationship building the company. But I guess I lost, I think, almost half of my friends trying to really uh, convince them, to start a company with me, and with my brother and I. So basically, those are things that you need to stay away from as much as possible. If you have, co-founders, if you are looking for co-founders, try to look outside your circle and keep your relationship personal.
Thank you so much to the speakers for all of your wonderful responses. I think there's a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of bravery to admit to certain failures and to share that really publicly. As Ryan said, like, we do not include failures in our bios or on our resumes, and it really takes a lot to share that. So thank you. Um, as we wrap up, I noticed a lot of different themes throughout this panel, whether it's embracing failure and acknowledging that there is no one set path to starting a startup. And if there's anything that I think the audience members should take away, it's that these four panelists here today are all examples of the different paths you can take to creating a startup, and that no two paths are exactly the same. On kind of that note about how the startup path can be very like glorified, or you can only see like the achievements and you don't really hear about people's past like failed startups. I also want to share this like kind of inside joke that we have here at Stanford, where like they say that people have like duck syndrome, and that, I don't know, King, if you know this one or have heard of it as well, but like,
Yes, of course.
people say that, yeah. I feel like everybody here knows it, because duck syndrome is basically saying that like a lot of students at Stanford are like literally like ducks, in the sense like from like upwards they can be like floating and like very like chill, very calm, whereas like if you look like underneath, like the ducks kind of like paddling really furiously, which kind of is a metaphor for kind of like the internal panic and like anxiety that a lot of students face. And I feel like this metaphor really applies to like the startup scene as a whole. And based on my experiences, like being born and raised in the Philippines and like seeing like the world reflect from there, like I can say that I kind of witnessed the same thing, that there's this tendency for a lot of people in the startup world, or like in life in general, to seem like everything's like okay, emphasizing the achievements, emphasizing the glossy bits of life, posting it on social media, when there's a lot of struggle and there's a lot of work that you need to take to get to that point. So if there's anything that you all listening, take away from that, again, there's no one set way to create a startup. Reach out to people, look for mentors, and know that I think we all experience duck syndrome every now and then, and that's totally normal. So thank you again so much to the amazing panelists. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will hand it back to the hosts.
The younger attendees watching us become excited by your examples and experiences. As we're now approaching the end of the InnovNation program, you would like to thank our speakers, panelists, and guests for your support and time to be with us today. And to formally close this program, we have Mr. Alvin M. Navarro, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Information and Communications Technology. As the Assistant Secretary, Attorney Navarro is facilitating the mission delivery of DICT's 3 bureaus in charge of training, industry development, and government digital transformation. Educated at the University of the Philippines, he has close to 15 years of governance experience, having held positions in housing, finance, environment, justice, and intellectual property sectors. In the private space, before joining DICT, he has advised IT startups and enterprises on legal and strategic matters. So everybody, please give a very warm welcome to Assistant Secretary Attorney Navarro.
On behalf of the Department of Information Communications Technology, I would like to thank all the speakers who contributed to this highly informative session today. I am sure the 2 panel sessions we had are truly encouraging and full of entrepreneurial spirit. Each speaker has served as an inspiration to all aspiring entrepreneurs who have joined us for today from all over the country. The DICT is grateful for moderators John Dave Dueñas of HY Brain and Audrey Pe of Women in Tech. Our panelists did an excellent job in this conversation. Graham Jimenez of Hyperstocks Inc., King Francis Henilla of High Meridian Technologies, Timmy De Jesus of Payruler, Mark Louis Fernando of When in Baguio, Ryan Liamoso of Rental B and Alternative Housing Group, Victor Rivera of ABO School, Jess Manalansan of Quickwire, and King Alan D. of Expeda. I thank our partners, DOST, DTI, and QBO Innovation Hub for the wonderful collaboration and making this event possible year after year, whether it be face-to-face or virtual. I would also like to thank the ICT Industry Development Bureau for leading the preparations for DICT's end on this significant startup initiative. This will inspire innovation and build a community across the region and beyond our shores. The InnovNation is specially organized to raise awareness about the opportunities created by startups and provide learning opportunities and initiatives that will support and foster the growth of the startup ecosystem. This afternoon, we will have the Philippine Startup Challenge Finals for the professional category. This event encourages and supports Filipinos in creating innovative and relevant ICT products and services that may potentially develop into viable business ventures as well as solve social problems. We encourage everyone to join us and listen to the 25 startup finalists that will be featured later. The InnovNation, Philippine Startup Challenge, and the Philippine Startup Week would not have been possible without all the relevant stakeholders engaging actively together. Yesterday, we heard from each agency secretary as to their own startup programs. Later today, we will have a session featuring each agency's updates on the implementation of the Innovative Startup Act. We urge everyone to take full advantage of the various opportunities and support provided by the government. Let us all make sure that we can get a piece of the action in the global digital economy. See you later in the Philippine Startup Challenge Finals. Thank you very much.